Hello, and welcome to Growth Cultivated, a Blue Bonsai Group podcast where we explore smarter, more sustainable growth for health, wellness, and aesthetics businesses. I'm your host, Michelle Cassini. Today, we're going to talk with Shea Fears, who has spent the last 6 years at the center of one of the fastest growing franchises in men's health. She joined Game Day Men's Health in 2020, where she has served as president for 3.5 years before stepping into her current role overseeing all Game Day corporate locations in California. While managing explosive franchise growth, building departments from scratch, and raising 3 kids, she quietly hit a wall. And that burnout was real. And she came to a turning point when she realized that the very services she was actually championing for patients were the ones that she actually needed herself. Well, welcome to the show, Shea. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about your background, what you do, and about Game Day Men's Health?
Hello. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the introduction. So, just a little bit more like about, the background and really how I got to where I am today. Obviously, 6 years, it was a wild ride with Game Day, but I started out in Temecula, California. I was just, helping out with operations. And shortly after I started at Game Day in 2020, we're opening up our second location, still just kind of like a mom and pop, new regenerative functional medicine, cash pay medicine concierge clinic, really trying to figure it out and grow these 2 clinics. And I had, just gotten pregnant about 8 months after and um didn't stop me. The owner of the company, he also, still kind of jokes around. If I was able to have a laptop, on my belly in that hospital room, I totally would have. I was, 5 days out before, giving birth to my now 4-year-old at that time, turning 5 soon. And just, I think, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the space. At that time, I was somewhat familiar with cash pay medicine, but, I think concierge medicine in the last decade has really transformed. And I think that's where a lot of doctors and, entrepreneurs are really turning to now for so many different reasons. But, when I started out at Game Day, that whole pivotal, emotional change from the Western medicine side, moving into cash pay medicine is just so appealing. It's appealing to franchise owners or soon to be franchise owners and really trying to find that niche in that space of like what's going to be our next business venture, knowing that they have a passion and want to, kind of join some type of a franchise system. So, kind of fast forward 2 years after being with Game Day, I became the president of the company. I also had a dual position as chief growth officer. Growth and operations is definitely, my passion. It's something I'm really good at. Even before Game Day, I've always been in kind of a director or managerial kind of position and really leading teams. And, that's definitely something that I feel very passionate about and I feel very strongly about as we kind of go into this world now of how to lead teams post COVID. I think that's something that we always talk about, now. But, really when we were about 2.5 years in, almost 3 years in, and I was serving as the president of the company, and the founder, he was like, "Hey, like, I think we're going to franchise this thing." And none of us knew anything about franchising. None of us had worked for a franchise system. None of us had worked as a franchise owner either, or a clinic director of a franchise owned clinic. And it was one of those things where we had a really beautiful pipe dream and we knew that we had to get there. And at the time, it was really me, it was one other individual, and it was the founder of the company. And so naturally, at that point in time, we weren't with a sales organization that, an FSO, like a franchise sales organization that would go out and sell franchises. It was them like cold calling, and some patients were knowing that we were going to franchise, and they're like, "Hey, I'm interested." And so we were literally, just kind of helping sell franchises like organically. All while I'm on the back end, I was doing kind of what I'm doing now, just running our corporate locations, the thing that I'm really good at. But at the same time, with that presidency role and chief growth officer role, I also was helping build out like what departments are we going to need? what kind of, we were building out a whole operations manual. Like we literally had to build from scratch a whole business in a box. And at that point, we were selling them organically. So we didn't know how fast we were going to grow. And then, a year goes by and we were, I think we had hit like 600 locations sold. And that was like mind blowing. Like
In a
we
year?
couldn't in a year, about a year, year and a half,
Wow.
600 locations. It was mind blowing. And there was kind of a point in time where a lot of franchise systems or businesses that are taking off to be a franchise system, one thing that they'll do is they will hold something called confirmation days. Confirmation days is where all these all these entrepreneurs and peoples of all walks of life, they're interested in becoming potentially a part of the franchise system. They all fly out once a month and they stay in a nice hotel, and we, put on we had dinner together, and it was interesting because we'd have a lot of these key departments that I really helped build for this franchise system. We had onboarding, and we had coaching and training, and we had all these different, marketing team. And so we'd all fly out together because we're not all in California where our HQ is based. And we would all take different tables. And so throughout dinner, we would shift around at different dinner tables. And then that group of people would then hear everything we do for marketing, everything, how we undergo onboarding, how are we going to do training. And so they're learning us as we are learning them, because at the end of the day, it's like speed dating. You
Yeah.
want the right people in your franchise system, and you also want them to be excited about what we're building, and it really came from a place from the heart. We were all so passionate about what we do every single day with our patients. And we all were also putting in so much work in it. You know, we also, as part for the confirmation days as well too, we all would get on a stage, in front of all these people, and we'd introduce ourselves. And, I would introduce myself and what I do for the company and, operationally. And it was one of those things where, every time the CEO would get on the stage and, he would introduce each key department head kind of for years, he would introduce me and say, Shay is the heartbeat of game day.
Mm.
And so, and that, I took that home every night with me. And so, there's a lot of passion behind game day. That's definitely like the Temecula locations, like my baby. They kind of really all are, all the corporate locations, because I've been here so long and I know all the patients. And, a lot of the things I look around and I'm like, wow, like that was my idea.
At one point, you had 1,000 franchises, and I can't even imagine the blood, sweat, and tears, that you put into that, really being the heartbeat, as your CEO had mentioned. I'm curious when it really hit you that this is happening and that you actually felt like, wow, I need to slow down. Like
Yeah.
this is something that I think, you told me before, it kind of felt like you hit a wall. Like you didn't realize it in the moment. And I don't think as women we realize it in the moment ever, but it's in those quiet times when we actually find a quiet time that things really start to bubble up. So I'm curious, in this journey, when did things start to bubble up for you?
Yeah. So believe it or not, it was like 5 years in, you know, it was about a year ago. I think because the rise of the company was happening so fast. I mean, I don't know if I slept more than like 3.5, 4 hours a night in like several years. I mean, it was such a roller coaster building the plane while we're flying it, kind of a deal. But, it's about a year ago. I think I also, because I was working so much, it's one of those things, especially if you're a parent as well too, also you're a parent at the same time as being an operator, whether you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, whatever walk of life you're in, but holding some form of a career as being a parent. I would go nights where, my computer's up, and I'm not proud to, say this, but like I would make dinner, and as I'm making dinner, I was, working. And it took me a lot of years to really, take a step back and take that deep breath and say, hey, we have a solid team now. And I also think we were so new with franchising that it was time to bring in key players that really understood the franchise world. And so it was about a year ago, I was like, not even putting aside, wow, I am burnt out. Like
Mm,
I'm like just pushing through it so hard that I don't even realize I'm burnt out. But I had to look at my health as well too. I for my age and my body type, I was, starting to become on the heavier side, which has a whole other slew of health issues. And then I kind of dawned on me, like I'm working so much. I'm not pouring back into my cup for my kids, but I'm not meal prepping. I'm not eating healthy. I'm not going to the
mhm,
gym regularly. And it was not out of laziness. It was purely out of I'm a strong independent woman and I'm building my career and nobody's going to stop me. I
mhm.
had that really aggressive, strong independent woman mindset. But then I took a step back and I'm like, but that's not the whole, bucket here. You can be this strong independent man or woman, but if you're not, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not taking care of you as well too. And so that's really kind of where I had to take a look in the mirror about a year ago. And a lot of people, also have a good understanding, like corporate locations in a franchise system are almost the most important thing, the glue to the franchise system, because all eyes are on corporate all the
Mhm,
time.
mhm.
What is corporate doing? Are they following the same guidelines? And it's important to have a strong leader that is strong in all departments running the corporate locations to make sure that those franchise owners have somebody to look up to. Like that is like the most important thing to me is I want to be a leader to my children, a leader in our franchise system, a leader as a daughter and a friend. I need to be a leader that people can look up to. And people, I've talked about this for so many years, especially to my staff. I do not ever wanna wake up. I don't want them to wake up in the morning and feel anxious going into their day because they don't know if they can fully rely on me or fully, have that trust that if they're gonna go through something or have a problem, I'm gonna understand how to get them through the problem and find that solution for them. And so I feel very deeply about that. And so, and I'll just use the franchise system. If I'm not healthy and I'm not, the whole thing behind game day is health and fitness. And I'm just so work,
Kind of
perfection,
ironic.
perfection. It's so ironic. And it doesn't, I took a look at the mirror and I'm like, this doesn't even make sense, you know? So that's really, taking a look in the mirror about a year ago and really is like, hey, like I need to practice what I'm preaching. I want them to look up to me. I want to have all the answers for them. And if I don't, I'm going to work with them to figure it out. And so, I started down a healthcare journey about a year ago. Obviously we are specialized for men, which is different than, female hormone therapy, but like we've done both. I helped open up, the women's side, Her Way Health and
Not
Hormones is
exclusive, right?
it's not and so we're there. I'm not a part of that brand anymore, but it's our sister brand, and so I will forever support that brand. I had a heavy hand in starting the female hormone side, and they're gonna franchise it this year, which is so excited for them, but at the end of the day, it's all the same. The way that I explain it is women need, this much testosterone and this much estrogen, and men need this much estrogen and this much testosterone. Our symptoms are the same. The way you test might be a little bit different, but it's all the same stuff. And like, it's important to have, your hormones balanced and a balanced diet and, staying active and healthy too. So
So it sounds like obviously you knew, when this turning point happened, like, wow, like I'm not practicing what I preach, so to speak, from a health standpoint. But at the same time, I think it probably gave you really good insight into your clients and patients and what they're going through and why there's so many of us that are running the rat race, if you will. And it's all for good reason because we're trying to provide or we're trying to excel or we're trying to learn or we're trying to impart wisdom. But at the end of the day, if we're not taking care of ourselves, then it kind of can all fall apart at some point. And so if you could talk a little bit about your health journey and what were some of the things that you did to kind of turn things around and start really focusing on your health and how that might be similar to what some of your patients are utilizing as well too.
Yeah. I think for me, and I probably, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, but a lot of like, there's a lot of people like me where the typical, like just get up and be motivated and do it. It just doesn't work for me. It's, especially because I was dealing with burnout at the time and I didn't, I was still recognizing it and not fully like really truly understanding it, and then I still had a million things on my plate to do. So we just keep going and then we just forget about it. So I had to I personally needed tangibility. Like I needed something tangible, and for me, I'm very open about this. I feel very strongly like about the peptide space. Obviously, it's something that we do at all of our most of our clinics, but you know, I think that tangibility, it's almost like having skin in the game, right? It's you are spending money, which it's a decent amount of money. You're spending money on, peptide therapy and a trainer or, methylation testing or, biohacking testing. And then you're following up and like, who knows, maybe you're paying an individual high end concierge doctor. And so it's like having skin in the game. And for me, that was tangibility. I'm physically, you know, putting it on the schedule. I'm making time to go to the gym every day, but I had to get a trainer. That was my tangibility for me. I am paying a trainer. I gotta go, And so, starting on the peptide therapy, I have a whole peptide journey that I talk a lot about. And, that really, I did lose 60 to 70 pounds. Like it's, to the point where again, seeing that reflection in the mirror took about, probably 6 months, and I was like, really 30 to 40 pounds in, of lost weight, and everybody's recognizing it, and obviously we've sold 998 locations at game day. So I have a lot of franchise owners that have known me from the
Mhm.
beginning, way before this healthcare weight loss journey and or just wellness journey in general. And they're just like, "Holy crap, like, you are a brand new person," And so that was kind of like my trigger. And for a lot of times, what I've seen over the years with our patients is that once they get started on that treatment, they have skin in the game. They're paying for it. They're poking themselves every single day, which isn't fun.
Accountability.
It's accountability. And so what happens is, like, they're 3 months, 4 months in, and then everybody around them starts noticing. For me, that was my motivator. My
Mhm.
motivator wasn't at day 1. It wasn't month 1, month 2. It was at, like, month 4 to 6 where I could physically see the change and everybody else really could too. So that was really my motivator, but in general, like, I made the change, me personally, because it was had been so long since I was, working out, consistently. I got a trainer. I needed that accountability for me. I knew I was not going to be able to go to the gym every day and be consistent. And then, a lot of people that are new in the fitness space, they go to the gym and then they don't know where to look at and like what machines to use. They quit. They just quit. And so I think, I always tell people that, are like, oh my God, you look so good. You lost all this weight. You seem happier. You have more energy. What would you recommend? I'm always like, go get a trainer in the first 3 to 4 months. It's so important. But then, your diet, and then, and not everybody, would qualify or needs to do peptide therapy. For me, though, it was extremely helpful, not only for, losing weight and retaining the muscle and things like of that nature, but, they have other peptides that's like really helpful for cognitive function. And for what I do every single day, that is like so key. And then I also started testosterone therapy. I know sometimes it's a little hush hush for women, but I'm very open about it. It's very different.
Tell us more about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, testosterone therapy, they have, for hormones in general for women, they have testosterone, they have estrogen, and then you have progesterone, that you can supplement and take if you are deficient. I'm at the age right now, I only, benefit from taking testosterone therapy, but it's much different than men. The concentration is like a tiny little speck compared to, their typical 200 milligram per ml concentration. So, for me, it's super interesting. Typically my testosterone range for my age should be, anywhere from 55 to 80. And I was consistently tested through a special method called LCMSMS, which is a little bit more of a abstract way to test. And it's a little bit more of an accurate end for females, very important for that. You know, and my test levels were constantly coming back 1 to 3. So I was very deficient. And so one thing that I realized after I started testosterone therapy that was my biggest symptom that I never realized before is it affected my speech. It affected my speech. It affected
Hmm.
me getting words out and having that memory of like, I'm trying to convey something. It physically was a cognitive, symptom. And then, when I started on testosterone therapy, I'm not always the best perfect patient and I'm forgetful and because I'm doing a million things at once every day. But I would miss, I think I missed like maybe 2 or 3 doses out of, the last year that I've been on testosterone therapy. And I immediately get migraines. And so when my testosterone starts to
Mm.
tank, it causes migraines because I drop such into a low deficiency state. That's how it looks on me, and it might not be the same for everybody else, but it was a really big game changer for me.
I think there's an element there. You don't know what you don't know. Like that was just kind of a wow moment for me in terms of thinking about, as you get older, like you kind of just start to accept certain things like, okay, this is I'm slowing down, or I'm not going to have as much energy, or oh, I still got my mom brain, making jokes, whatever. And realistically, it doesn't have to be that way, and I think so many
Mm-mm.
people don't realize that it doesn't have to be that way, and you can feel bitter, you can feel different, and I think that's what, again, hormone therapy, peptides, everything is just that's why it's exploding so much because it's like, people are finding out and it's like, wait a minute, I want in on this too. I didn't realize that this was even an option for me that I could feel different. So I have to imagine that a lot of people are completely surprised by their results in terms of what they get after testing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, at the end of the day, perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, it is real and it is happening, And so, again, that's a big difference between men and females. Females, it's a non-negotiable. Like we're going every that is just going to be a
It
stage
will
of our
happen.
life that we go through. It will happen. Where men, it's they don't have, there's you'll see like on Reddit and every like menopause, but really like it's a real thing for us women and we will eventually go through it. And so it's one of those things where we have been taught our whole entire lives for centuries and centuries, like, oh no, it's just a normal stage of life. Like just deal with it, in really extreme cases like depression hormone deficiency can cause and just take an SSRI and you'll just get some more sleep and even though like the woman's like holding their baby crying, right? Okay, I'll get more sleep,
Mhm.
it's fine. But really in reality, like yes, we're all going to go through perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, but it doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't have to be miserable. I talk a lot about this story and because it's forever stained in my mind. But, a couple of years ago, it was Christmas time and we did a Christmas party, like a little ground marketing, had game day kind of set up. And it was for the LA County Jail. And everybody that works at the jail was there. Like, I forgot exactly what her title was, but kind of like the boss lady that is like the head honcho there, and the DAs and all the judges and all the sheriffs were there, like everybody a part of the LA County Jail. They were having this really big, beautiful, cool Christmas party. We were lucky enough to have like a booth there and just talk about our company. And a woman steps aside and she's like, "Hey, can I talk to you for a minute?" And I said, "Hey, yeah, of course. What's going on?" And she's like, "I really love what you guys are doing about game day. My best friend, her husband also goes to the one in Santa Monica." She's like, "But," she's like, "I have a question for you, you know?" She's like, and she almost like got tearful, and she said, like, "We really need something for us women." She's like, "Me and my sister, we struggle with menopause and we drive down to Tijuana every 90
Wow.
days and we go and get our testosterone pellet insertion done because we have nowhere to turn to, And so that was probably, the rise of game day, and it was the beginning talks of me and some other, key leaders, part of game day, where we were talking about, "We gotta do this for women." And I was, like, felt very strongly that, "Hey, let's do game day, but, like, we need to do this for for the women's side,"
Mhm.
which we do have one now. So, it was one of those things where in my mind, I'm like, "Man, I've been so, like, just, focused on men's health, men's health, men's health for great reason, but it was like, whoa, like this is an issue all around, where you go to endocrinology, you go to urology, you go to your OBGYN, and they're just like, you're tired.
Mhm.
You're depressed, you get on SSRIs, or, you just need to work out more. Whatever the case may be, you need to work less, and so it was a really interesting, I will never forget that conversation that I had with that woman. And, you know, it's seeing a very strong, independent woman who's leading a massive organization be so in distress of like needing to
Mhm.
find help for that issue. So because it takes a toll on us. Like our hormone deficiency really takes a toll on us. Having too much weight takes a toll on us, mentally, physically,
Mhm.
emotionally. And so, again, about a year ago, that's when I took a look in the mirror and I was like, I am not just burnt out. I'm also physically, mentally, and emotionally drained by not taking care of myself too. So it was a really, really positive change for me. And now, kind of what I'm starting to do now is, apart from me being a mom and having my career at game day, I'm building this personal brand around my own voice and starting to try to be more intentional online on my social media platforms and really be that voice of reason for the women that are single or married, doesn't matter. It's there's no difference there, but they are struggling with their job and trying to eat right and trying to be healthy and make good decisions. I also cut out alcohol completely a year ago, and that was, like, life-changing for me, and, that was a really big decision on my end, and so, just, like, all around, like, physically, mentally, emotionally, sound now, and I'm not perfect by any means, but having that voice of reason for other women to really break out of their shell and be able to look in the mirror and, using me as that voice is, like, super important in what I'm, building now.
So what would you say to those women who are listening now who, potentially are leaders and business owners and this is all resonating with them and they don't know where to start and they don't really know what the first step would be. What would you say to them? What advice would you give them if they were on the fence or at least, they started feeling all that emotional bubble up as well? Like what is that first step that women should be taking?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, like, having that, like, heart to heart with yourself and just 100% telling yourself, "I believe in me." Like,
Mm.
just believe in yourself. That was, like, the hardest thing for me to overcome because I had sat in that rut for so long. Like, I'm never gonna lose the weight. I'm never gonna be able to go to the gym. I'm never gonna be able to get into that routine like all those other, men and female I see online, I had to really, 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 truly believe in myself that I can do this. Because if you're not over that belief, if you are stuck in that rut of like, I'm in this rut. I don't do what I'm supposed to do almost day over day over day. And I'm always too tired and I'm always this and I'm always that. You start to feel a lot of shame, and I was in that shameful rut for so long where I had to break out of that. So I think first and foremost, just believing in yourself. It's never too late. And I think, furthering that, like I have a very type A personality. So I really like to schedule things out. And so if that works for you, like scheduling it out, making sure if you're so tired every single day when you get home from work, probably not the best time to like put the gym in the schedule. Sundays are my meal prep days. Saturdays, I always leave at least 4 hours of like you know, no brow lamb appointments or no like, personal appointments. Like 4 hours on a Saturday is outside with the kids, hiking, biking, whatever that is. And like, I'm a scheduler. I have to put things, even as silly as like go outside, it's in my calendar right now, every Saturday for 4 hours. So I think, believing in yourself, scheduling it in where you're not going to, move away from it, sticking because once we start to get in that mode of scheduling it out, scheduled, and we're able to stick with it,
Mhm.
that like forcing that belief, because I had to force myself to believe in myself, believe it or not, in the beginning. It wasn't easy. And I also struggled with, and I'm very open about this, but I struggled with imposter syndrome for a very long
Right.
time. I went to therapy for it for a full year, well, 9 months to a year. Like it was a serious thing for me. So I really struggled with the belief in myself. So in the beginning, full truth, I had to force myself to believe in myself. Then I got into that schedule routine. Then I continued to do it. And then I was like, oh, wow, like, okay, I really do believe in myself, I'm doing it. And so I think that's, first things first, believe in yourself, schedule those things out. Like, what are your goals, and then check in every, 30 days or 90 days with yourself. What
Mhm.
was I able to do? But don't beat yourself up if you didn't hit a goal. Or shoot, like the last 2 weeks, I only went to the gym twice. Don't beat yourself up. You're recognizing it
Mhm.
and then move forward from it and then try to be better the next week. So, I think us, especially us as women, we get really, we beat ourselves up so bad, to the point where it starts to, cause exclusion from where we really should be mentally and emotionally. And then in turn, it does kind of, I believe affects like our physical well-being as well too. So
I agree. I think you hit it on the head when you said shame. You are such a go-getter, for so many years and you're wearing all the hats and then it's almost like accepting to yourself that you can't do all the things. It's like you feel like you're letting yourself down almost, and I
it's
might be
horrible.
I'm probably talking about my personal self right now because I resonate a lot with what you're saying as well too. And it is getting over that and not being disappointed in yourself, and it's just there's so much wrapped up in that, that I think I just so appreciate your candor and really being able to open up and be transparent about it because it shouldn't be a hush hush thing.
Mm-mm.
A lot of women are feeling this. And so it's the more we can talk about it, the more you can normalize it, the more it's not a stigma, it's not a secret anymore, it's not something it's just accepted and you're able to accept yourself and help other strong women in your life as well. So
Totally.
I'm curious as we wrap up, I do ask all guests the same question because you've obviously been on a whirlwind journey and if you could tell yourself something, maybe when you started this journey back in 2019, 2020, before you started with game day. What do you know now that you didn't know then that you would tell yourself?
Ooh, this is a good one. Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so I hate to be repetitive. I think because I know I literally just touched on this, but yeah, I think like you are like stronger than you think. If I want to be silly, it's buckle up. You're gonna
Mhm.
need to, But yeah, I think if I were to tell myself something, at the beginning that I see now and maybe didn't see in the beginning is just, you're stronger than you think. Like, and, going through trials and tribulations and roller coaster rides and, go through it, like go straight through the fire. I think that's a big one for me too. Go straight through the fire. A lot of the times if we saw the future and everything we went through in the from the beginning to the end, we'd probably turn around, we'd book it. We're not going through that, but
Boy, yeah.
knowing, but I think and I did, probably 99.9% of the time, I ran through that fire. And so I would really maybe tell a younger version of me or a previous version of me, just continue to keep going through that fire. You're gonna grow. You're gonna grow through it. You're gonna become bigger. You're gonna become better. Um,
So if our listeners wanted to follow you or connect with you, how would they do that? Where would you point them?
Yeah, I'm on just, TikTok, Instagram, social media platforms. It's kind of, personal. It's really lifestyle, fitness, mindset, focused. So, and it's just Shea Tiana, which is my name, first name, middle name, two A's at the end. But yeah, and I post a lot of like motivational fitness. I try and I am a little bit more geared towards women, but it's also like open for both, it's really for both genders as well too. But yeah, for now I'm on TikTok and Instagram, and it's a great way to connect as well too, So
Well, you are such a motivation to so many
thank
women
you.
and men out there. You've really got me fired up after this
Yeah.
conversation. And yeah, I've learned so much from you, and you never know when you're gonna meet people and cross paths, but there's always a reason. I'm a true believer in that, and yes, I just appreciate your transparency and what you're trying to do to help so many out there. So thank you so much for coming to the show today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
Awesome. Well, those of you who are listening and would like to follow us, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Until then, keep cultivating smarter growth. Thank you.